Persona 4 is my personal favorite entry in the Persona series. A game that paradoxically manages to not only unify the seemingly contradictory tones of upbeat teenage life with the story of an ongoing serial killer using supernatural powers to kill for the sick amusement, but it is also at once one of the most out there of all SMT premises and yet one of the most brutal and realistic examinations of teenage melodrama and the twisted mindsets of murderers killing for self validation and entertainment. While many SMT games are overtly about something, few are as down to earth and personal about them as P4 is, with the exploitation of true crime and how it can be sensationalized to erase the victims and their loved ones while glorifying the perpetrators. It is a timeless message that I feel the next generation should experience, given that there are legitimate concerns by experts of a new generation of serial killers being on the horizon after the trauma that the world continues to face in the 2020s. And true crime is a fascination that is so mainstream that I once heard a patient and a nurse gush over a new Netflix documentary about a serial killer in Montreal while visiting my father in the hospital last month. And it is also one that I share as well, having loved to hear gothic personalities like Rob Gavagan recount the graphic details and deranged mindsets ever since I was a teenager, discovering the true potential of content on the internet. And now, seemingly, a new way to experience the game is on the horizon. Newer, purtier, and Persona 5ified. And I am very unexcited for the currently only confirmed Atlus release for the immediate future. And while there are those who are genuinely excited for this fresh coat of paint, my apathy seems to be a more common stance. I've said this before, but since that didn't seem to come across with my blunt language literally saying as much when I've covered it before, I'll reiterate it here. I am not excited for Persona 4 Revival, and now I'm going to explain why, because apparently for some commentators that doesn't come as the literal subtext of a video explaining why Persona 4 didn't need to be remade. Anyway, P4 was not a game that needed to be remade. There are even those who argue that Golden was unnecessary, but setting that aside, Golden is already available on all modern platforms, including current gen thanks to backwards compatibility, and was ported to them not that long ago. Golden was shadow dropped on Steam back in 2020 and later was ported to all modern platforms shortly after the Persona 25th anniversary in 2023. It is widely available and for a reasonable price that most can actually afford, versus the new one, which will likely launch for the industry standard of $80 plus a bunch of nonsense to inflate back to free figures of cash. And even its existence just feels like a cynical cash grab. Persona 3 at least had a demand for a remake, and Reload was not that. The content that fans wanted all in one game is still divided between Fez, Portable, and now Reload, unless you use some mods which do bring over some of the content to the others. And Episode I guess one of the features that Fez had, which Portable did not, was only released as DLC at a later date, only further carving up P3 amongst all these different releases. And when that is how Atlus treats the most requested remake request of their most popular series, it doesn't exactly paint a good picture for the significantly less asked for P4. And this seemingly misreading of fan demand is only the beginning of Reload's problems, seemingly misunderstanding some of the creative intent behind the original, and that is despite the stated intention to remain as close and as true to 2006's P3 as possible. The cutscenes now feel more like the generic ones of P5 rather than the Shinbo-esque ones of P3, pieces of animation that wouldn't feel out of place in the likes of the Soul Taker, and brought to life with weird perspective shots, Dutch angles, and harsh blown-out coloring that lent many scenes an uncanny yet simultaneously gothic feel. But I think that the cutscenes getting watered down so much was a symptom of another issue. Persona 3 Reload wanted to be Persona 3, but it didn't want to be the 2000s Persona 3, it wanted to be 2020's Persona 3. The issue is that Persona, as a series that takes heavy influence from Japanese youth culture and high school life, is always going to be a product of its time. The messages of accepting death and acknowledging the truth are timeless and universal, yes, but the way in which the themes are told are not. Because of this, P3 and P4 are like time capsules, a brief window backwards into the mid to late 2000s, and the circumstances of it went through the developers' minds as they were being developed. Anime was still comparatively niche, the war on terror had only just begun, and TV was still more than just the retro trend that YouTube is always desperately trying to become. And instead, it was the primary source for my generation to watch the new episodes of The Big Free, Avatar, Adventure Time, and To Catch a Predator, to name a few. It was in this environment that these games were conceived and developed. Hence why TVs are the allegory for the distribution of information and misinformation rather than cell phones, tablets, or Twitter, or just the internet broadly. I really feel that this is a major part of the charm for the Persona series since these games are released with a modern youth culture audience in mind, but they also date these games to their given time periods. If Persona 4 was released in 2027, it would not be the same game as the one released in 2008. But because Persona 4 was released in 2008, it feels inherently retro without any real attempts to fully embrace that charm or appeal. Sure, Revival might be better on a technical level, akin to Reload, but is it going to be a better game than the original? Is it going to manage the difficult task of flip flopping between tones in a way that adds to the game's experience rather than detracts from it? I personally am quite skeptical, and I feel like if they had just wanted to reintroduce Persona 4 to a modern audience, then they should have just released a new spin off to reignite interest in the already released version. I'll say it before and I'll say it again. Persona 4 did not need a remake. It never did, but we've seemingly entered the remake era of Atlus, where the priority now appears to be remakes of their older games. Some, like Rhino 1 and SMT5, genuinely needed that treatment, but Persona 4 did not, and Persona 3 needed a definitive edition that combined the features of both FES and Portable, and allowed the players to select their experience accordingly without the mods which come in clutch to offer that experience instead. This is why I find it quite difficult to feel excitement at what should be the next big Persona release. And honestly, it makes me a bit skeptical on future remakes as well, even that coveted SMT4 reload, which I've been advocating and hoping for quite a while now, especially on this channel. That's going to do it for this video. Sorry that I didn't make this video closer to the actual announcement. I tried, but I was having trouble putting my thoughts on both games into words, and so I decided to separate the videos into explaining why I am excited for Persona 6 and not so much for Persona 4 Reload. And I was also scrambling with what little time I had to get the editing done on my last video. 6 potential genres for Persona 6, only for that video to be hit with a copyright claim that prevented anyone from seeing the video and forcing me to go back and put a still image over the Detective Conan clips. Because the only options that YouTube would allow was just cutting out that important piece of the video where I explain why Persona 6 could work as a mystery like Detective Conan, or else just leaving it up but not getting anything out of it. Anyway, early next week will be the companion video to this one, explaining why I am very excited for Persona 6. And on screen now is my aforementioned 6 genres video, because I seriously feel like just marketing it after all the effort I put into that one, and I'm still a bit peeved that it got delayed after a strike. And on the other side is something that the YouTube algorithm thinks you'd like. I hope everybody watching has a terrific week, and I wish that people would comment more in my videos. So until my Persona 6 video, I will see you later.